Hey guys, welcome back to the Elasmobranch Evolution Podcast. Yeah, I'm taking an online course about sharks and rays, Elasmobranch, not Elasmobranch, which in college, taking biology 2, I was pretty sure that my professor said Elasmobranch, but maybe it's one of those words that could be pronounced either way, I'm not sure. But I thought it might be a good idea to kind of mix it up at the beginning and share an interesting observation or something that really catches my eye before getting into the source material for this episode, which will focus on an ancient Eocene sand tiger shark, size variance in those, as well as a little book I read about size in animals and why it's a very important factor in their whole makeup, which involves all animals, including sharks. Usually when I read books like that, I always apply it to sharks, so I think that will be interesting. So here we go. Anyways, taking this shark and ray course, it provided a very old, maybe one of the first phylogenetic trees. It's called Pedigree of Man. You can easily look it up. It basically classifies all of the modern animals, including sharks. Sharks are vertebrates, but if you're just going by the book of their primitive or most derived characteristics, they appear to be very primitive vertebrates, which is reflected on this tree. They're just above jawless animals, which those are the hagfish and the now only parasitic lamprey. I'm not sure if there are any predatory lamprey, but nowadays they only feed off the blood of other fish. So, sure, they don't have bones, they don't have jaws connected to their skulls, but if it doesn't have to be, why should it be? You know, if it's not broken, why fix it? Their body design has been around for roughly 300 or so million years. I'm sure there were sharks around the time of the dinosaurs that looked almost identical to sharks today, and it's still working really well. So why should they evolve into something else when what they're doing right now is perfectly fine? I'm just saying. And this phylogenetic tree has man at the very top, saying we're the pinnacle of evolution, which don't even get me started about that. I believe that every animal has its place. If it's successful, if it's been around and it's doing great, what's wrong with it? Just let it thrive and don't try to say one organism is inherently better than another organism, which having favorites is fine. I do it all the time. I think some animals are more interesting than other animals, but to say we're inherently better than everything else just because we have bigger brains and opposable thumbs so we are able to manipulate things a lot more makes us inherently better is backwards thinking. As a species, we need to get over this anthropogenic, human-centered mindset and move on to appreciate all life as it has existed for millions of years. This is coming partially as an environmental science major, because we definitely don't respect life as we should. But also, as an amateur paleontologist, there are many types of life that are misunderstood and or underrated, and not just sharks. And if you guys know any grand misunderstood species, I definitely recommend let me know. I might make a P-squared biology podcast about it if you can really convince me. And I'll talk at the end about suggestions. If you guys really want me to make an episode about a specific shark or a specific topic in biology, I'll tell you the steps. But for now, we'll plunge right into the topic. I'll first provide a few corrections for the first episode, which nobody is perfect. Even though I seem to be making sense most of the time, nobody is perfect. No scientific study is perfect, even though it aims to be repeatable and unbiased. There might be underlying biases and underlying assumptions, but there's a few corrections I'd like to make. The first one being, I assumed that sharks move around much more quickly and efficiently than rays, and I'm not completely sure about that. I kind of assumed it because rays stay at the bottom, at least stingrays, a lot of the time, and wait for their prey. I'm not even completely sure about that, because I've been fishing and you'll just leave a bait out there and I'm sure it detects it and moves over to the prey after smelling it. I'm sure they have really good olfactory reception, kind of like sharks. And I know cownose rays and skates, they seem to form massive schools. I'm not sure how much they migrate or how much distance they cover. I think it'd be really interesting if there was ever studies about how they migrate and or how far. I'm just not completely sure. Maybe someday I'll look into that. But also, I made a statement about sand tiger-like teeth, the real tall, slender type of teeth, being less interesting than the broader, more serrated teeth. What I meant to say was it was less interesting because around the time of the Danian, the time right after the dinosaur KT extinctions, you only basically find one type of teeth in that time period. It's much better and more interesting if you're finding a lot of type of teeth, both those broad type and also the slender type of teeth, because then you have multiple feeding strategy types, which means there's all kinds of types of prey, and you have much more niches. The biodiversity is higher, there's higher levels of ecological significance, and everything's thriving if there's more types of sharks, which you can easily imply there's more types of prey and there's all kinds of abundance. And this is relevant because the shark I'll be talking of, the first source of the two sources I'll be covering for this episode, is one of those sand tigers. Actually it first arrived not long after that KT mass extinction and dominated for dozens of millions of years, which, spoiler alert, was Striatolamia. But first, I'd like to talk about the grand adaptations. I don't want to keep saying this and nobody knows what I'm talking about. Of course, we're talking about electroreception. With all those ampullae of Lorenzini, they can detect all kinds of weak electrical fields, including fish's heart rates. They have great eyesight, great hearing, great sense of smell, which is why if you're fishing after sharks, using bait, of course, is usually the best option. You might catch some catfish, depending on what type of bait and how big the catfish are. But, yeah. And of course, they're super streamlined. They move super efficiently with those S waves from side to side. They have dermal denticles, which aid in protection, but also with moving through the water very smoothly, being their scales, which resemble their teeth actually in structure. It's thought their teeth originated from their scales moving in their mouths and becoming larger. Of course, evolution occurs through genetic mutations, which basically means there's accidents in the genetic code, and the ones that are beneficial are further enhanced. And of course, the ones that are less beneficial die out. And that's the process of natural selection. But that's enough about general biology. I assume a lot of you probably know already about these processes. So we'll get straight into this paper. So this paper is called Comparing Body Size of the Sand Tiger Shark Striatolamia macrota from Eocene Localities in the Eureka Sound Formation, Banks Island, Northern Canada, and the Tuscahoma Formation, Meridian, Mississippi. This was done by Dina M. Feeman in 2016. It's an undergraduate honors thesis, but she had plenty of advisors. Overall, this paper demonstrated how, on average, the sharks further north, even though at the time that these sharks were alive in the early Eocene, the Earth was much warmer than it currently is, and there were no glaciers at the poles, as difficult as it is to imagine that. Of course, that meant sea levels were much, much higher, and sharks covered much more of the oceans, much more of the world, because there was more ocean. Now, I'm not completely sure if Striatolamia sand tiger sharks were the most abundant sharks, or they might have been in a situation where their teeth were the most likely to fossilize. Because if you look at modern lemon sharks, their fossils are all over the time period where you find Megalodon fossils around 10 million years ago. And that's in large part because they swam in shallow water where everything was fossilizing, whereas Megalodon were mostly offshore, away from those formations. And as well as being on the bottom, that meant when they lost their teeth, it didn't have to travel as far and would be much more likely to be buried. Although I recognize that a lot of these slender type of teeth are actually general, unidentifiable carchariform shark teeth. But I know for a fact a lot of them are lemon shark teeth. Not to say that's a bad thing. I'm not sure if it's a similar phenomena for much of the Paleocene and Eocene. They might have lived on the bottom. They might have also swam through the water column, but I'm no sand tiger expert again. I just know they mostly ate fish because of the type of teeth they had were slender and more built for stabbing versus cutting and slicing. Now, this time period in the early Eocene was a super warm, biodiverse time in Earth's history, which occurred in this paper around 55 to 50 million years ago, which was when both the Canadian and the Mississippian fossil assemblages came from. And the validity of the explanation of their findings is I'm somewhat skeptical of it, and I'll get into why. But I just wanted to bring this paper up because it definitely brought up some interesting trends whereby, you think one species during one time period will be pretty uniform in size throughout the world. At least that's how it is nowadays. If they're completely different, they might be a different species. But before this paper, I didn't believe that sharks differed in size from north to south. And also, it brought up a very interesting formula called Shimada's formula, which came from a scientific paper in 2002. I tried getting access to this paper, but it was behind a paywall. But I found an abstract of it, and I'll get into the general description of it. So about this time period, the early Eocene. Of course, the Eocene was a long period and very influential for all modern animal groups. The Eocene lasted from around 56 or 55 million years ago to around 34 million years ago. And during this time period, you had all kinds of crazy new animals. Whales evolved from hoofed mammals, primates radiating, all kinds of fish, especially bony fish, modern types of bony fish evolving, modern carchariform sharks, including, all of the main modern types, tiger, bull, lemon, snaggletooth. You also had lamniforms radiating. You had Ododus evolved into Carcharias, starting to look very Megalodon-like in both size and shape, although those auriculitis and angustidin teeth had side cusps and were not absolutely ginormous yet. I could be here all day talking about those Eocene radiations, but for all intents and purposes, we're focusing on this medium to large size sand tiger shark, Striatolamia macrota, which its teeth could grow up to 2, maybe 3 inches. Actually, 2.5 is probably around the max that they ever got. And the Striatolamia group persisted all the way until the mid-Miocene, around 15 million years ago. So they were a very successful group. They arrived not long after the extinction of the dinosaurs. That's what the first episode was about, that huge turnover event. The only early to mid-Eocene teeth that I know for sure is from that general time period it's the very first known tiger shark species called Galeocertolatidens. They look fairly tiger shark like. They have the main cusp that's recurved and then the smaller cusp right beside it, but they're definitely miniature, much smaller than the modern species Galeocerto, Cuvier. Definitely you can see how these evolved from triachid sharks. And these are from Andalusia, Alabama, but I've never been fossil hunting up there. But apparently they have some really good ancient formations, including one of the mega predators of that time period that arose in the late Eocene, the Basilosaurus, a really big 50-foot predatory whale. That was much later. That was around 40 to 35 million years. We're talking about 50 million years ago. So in this northern Canadian island, you find sand tiger fossil shark teeth, and it makes you wonder, why are there shark teeth in the Arctic? Of course, it was warmer back then, and we know for sure because there were other things growing that absolutely do not live in Arctic regions, including crocodilians called crocodilomorphs and garfish, which do not live nor thrive in Arctic regions at all. The formation was dated from zircon from volcanic ash, which dated the formation at 52.6 plus or minus 1.9 million years ago. I'm not sure how they calculated the temperature range. There's all types of proxies. There was a proxy for precipitation rates, the rates of rainfall, which came from fossil wood analysis, which is another sign that it was not an Arctic region. The mean annual temperature was around 8 degrees Celsius, or around 46.4 degrees Fahrenheit, with an annual range of 0 to 19 degrees Celsius, which is 32 to 66.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And the oceanic temperature range was 48.2 to 55.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which I'm no climate expert, but that's fairly subtropical, it seems like, or at least temperate. Definitely somewhere that reptiles and plenty of sharks should be able to thrive. And from calculating the oxygen values, from the way they calculate the amount of oxygen isotopes in the fossil shark teeth and the Striatolamia teeth. They took 30 teeth and got the oxygen 18 ratios to find the salinity range, and they found that, that's how they predicted the temperature as well as the salinity. Yeah, because they found it was brackish, similar to modern Delaware Bay, which brackish water can support freshwater organisms as well as marine organisms, but mostly toward the marine side. There's one fishing pier relatively local that is at the mouth of a river, and I only catch saltwater species there, those estuarine types of fish. So it's safe to assume that sharks should be in those brackish waters. So they're very adaptable. They live in freshwater too, don't get me wrong, but at much lower abundance. And this is another side note. I didn't want to make like 5 side notes before actually delving into the paper. Even though this material is younger than the first source, I am going to jump around in the timeline a little bit. It's not just going to be me keep on having younger and younger sources going to the present and then calling it a night. No, I'm going to definitely keep this podcast going, hopefully spread all of the interesting bits and start those conversations and share those interesting trends and hopefully convey trends of the past and how they apply to these interesting beasts. And the author compares this Canadian formation with the Mississippi formation, which may have been a little bit older, but still in that general time period, around 55 plus or minus 1.4 million years. Of course, the margin of error comes because no proxy is absolutely perfect, but it's still, for modern technology, that's pretty darn good if you can pinpoint it that well and have that low margin of error. And I've done calculations in some geology courses, and they're not the most exciting calculations, but they can be used to date those rocks. And it comes from the changing of those igneous rocks. The isotopes have radioactive decay, and slowly over time, certain elements become not other elements, but a different atomic number, different amount of neutrons or protons or something along those lines at a constant rate, independent of chemistry and environmental changes. But anyways, it didn't go into super specific details about the Mississippi site, but it seems overall very similar. It was also overall estuarine, but the salinity was higher, and maybe as a result, there was higher shark diversity. It also stated around this point that the early Eocene most likely the warmest period of the Cenozoic, or the age after the dinosaurs, with an annual temperature of 26.5 plus or minus 1 degree centigrade, which is 2 to 3 degrees centigrade or Celsius warmer than modern seas. Oh, actually, the mean annual temperature at this is called the Red Hot Truck Stop, or the Mississippi site. The mean temperature was 73.94 degrees Fahrenheit, or 23.3 degrees Celsius. And the mean annual temp of the Canadian site was 46.4. That means on average, the Red Hot Truck Stop formation site was on average around 27 degrees Fahrenheit warmer on average, which definitely should make a difference. I'm not sure if that makes more difference than the salinity changes. I know at certain temperatures, water behaves a little bit differently depending on salinity, or actually salinity influences temperature. Yeah, I can't remember exactly how. I took a few ocean science classes. I know there is a correlation, although the paper doesn't go into it. So before going into the details of the Striatolamia tooth differences between the North Canada formation and the Mississippi formation, I want to talk about the general diversity of that time period of sharks. So on the Elasmo.com website, which I'm sure a lot of you fellow shark enthusiasts have probably visited, there's a good webpage about the early Eocene of a site in Virginia called the Nanjemoy Formation. It's around the same time period. It's mostly dominated by lamniform sharks, although there are the other orders: bullhead, rectolobiform sharks, squatiniforms, squaliforms, and hexanchiforms. But for the large predatory sharks, it's mostly lamniforms still, even though you're starting to get, Physogaleus, maybe some tiger shark teeth, Abdunia, definitely triachid hound sharks, and cat sharks. But you also get Otodus obliquus, which is very popular in the fossil collecting community. I have a few of their teeth, and it seems during this time period is still dominated by those sand tiger shark teeth. But shark diversity was definitely increasing. Although Striatolamia wouldn't die out completely, it does appear, although I could be wrong, that they're slowly but surely becoming replaced by the broader tooth sharks. Although I'm sure during that time period, there's plenty of abundance, there's plenty of room for all kinds of species. So although extinctions may appear gradual, a lot of times they are sudden. And the same with evolution. People used to think it took millions upon millions of years, slow changes over time, but no. The more you observe the fossil record, it's usually done fairly quickly in geological time, in that a bunch of change can occur within even 1 million years. Mosasaurs only took around 5 million years to become fully aquatic. Their reign only lasted like 10 or 15 million years, and they evolved from very small terrestrial lizards. But as with the case of sharks, like I said, if it's not broken, why fix it? They can change, but if they don't have to, why should they? So it's only really the cases where you have a warming event or cooling event that you see big changes in both species diversity and size. And I won't leave you hanging before I start my next discussion. They found on average the teeth from the colder parts in Canada were on average larger than the typical teeth from the Mississippian site. Of course, I'm not talking about the Mississippian period. I'm talking about it's from actually Mississippi. I know people have split the Carboniferous period that occurred before the dinosaurs. At least in America, they split it up between the earlier Mississippian and the later Pennsylvanian for some reason. When I say Mississippian, for all intents and purposes for this podcast, I mean actually from Mississippi. Of course, in the Eocene. With any shark, if you look inside their jaws, which you may or may not do while it's alive, in most cases I hope you're looking at a photograph or a specimen of their jaws. Not to say they're cold-blooded killers, but they don't know your intentions. So I would recommend studying their jaws the right way. Okay, so if you look at their teeth come in all kinds of shapes and sizes relatively. I found this paper describing the general trends of their teeth, and I'll get into that. But for determining size based on teeth, because they have different types of teeth, different sizes, usually the larger teeth toward the front of the jaw and gradually become smaller toward the back of the jaw, although you do have in the very center of the jaw very small intermediate teeth. So the question arises, which type of teeth should you use to calculate the general size of sharks? Because in general, larger sharks have larger teeth, and of course smaller sharks, after they're born, have the smallest teeth. Although it depends on the species, of course. I'm not talking about like whale sharks. They always have tiny teeth. I'm talking about your typical highly predatory sharks. And you see this in the fossil record. The biggest teeth come from the biggest species and the biggest species that are adults. Whereas you might find, say, the largest Megalodon teeth are above 7 inches. They're massive. They're as big as a large hand. Whereas then if you ever see a lemon shark tooth that's, say, 1.25 inches, it's much, much smaller. But for a lemon shark tooth, that's pretty large. And that's because it was a small species. And on the same grain, you also have different types of teeth that it may appear to be from a baby shark, but it's actually from an adult shark. It's just the tooth position makes it small. So it's usually the posteriors. And I've seen this with collectors posting on social media, what kind of tooth is this weird baby shark tooth? And I'll tell them that's probably an adult posterior. And they don't tend to believe me, but you can believe what you want to believe, but I know that the most accurate you can get is studying the modern descendants and applying that to the ancient species. It's very necessary to get the full picture. You don't know how lucky you are that we have modern analogs of these sharks. Even in the Eocene, they're fairly modern. Whereas you look before the dinosaurs, there's no sharks around like that. So this is the paper that provides the formula of how to estimate a fossil shark's size based on one tooth. So the paper is called Dental Homologies in Laminiform Sharks, Chondrichthyes Elasmobranchi by Kensu Shimada, 2002. It describes the tooth positions. Says in most macrophagous laminiforms in the upper jaw, there's 2 rows of large anterior teeth, followed by a row of small intermediate teeth. And basically, the lower tooth row has similar arrangements. Then you have many lateral teeth, and then the posteriors. And of course, because the teeth vary in size and shape, they each have different functions. Because if they didn't have a function, they would be weeded out by natural selection. So obviously it's very important, or at least for the most successful sharks, to have all these different types of teeth. Basically, it seems that the large anterior teeth in the front of the jaw help with actually catching the fish, and then the laterals do most of the cutting, or at least kind of do stabbing and guide the prey back. And then the small posteriors maybe do a little bit more to prevent the fish from escaping. This occurs in all sharks, no matter if they have broad teeth or slender teeth. They always face toward the back of the jaw. So if the fish or the type of prey try to escape, they're just impaling themselves. As deranged as that sounds, it's pretty neat. So this trend occurs even in the sand tiger shark Striatolamia. The paper has a really good picture of all the tooth positions. It shows that Striatolamia had very small intermediates. Those are the few teeth that are in the center of the jaw or near the anteriors. I guess help with clutching, maybe. I'm not too sure about the function of intermediates. And then comparatively, there are huge anteriors, or very long and robust. And you have many lateral teeth in the middle of the jaw that do most of the work, it appears. And the last 3 or 4 laterals become increasingly smaller. Yeah, so the front 3 or 4 laterals are kind of big. The 5th one is smaller. Then the last 3 laterals are very small, comparatively pretty small. So that's a lot of teeth that are classified as laterals, That's about 7 or 8 lateral teeth compared to a few other types of teeth. But then again, laterals do most of the work, and that's what you find. Although, because you're finding random teeth from random species and random tooth positions, if you do enough fossil hunting, you tend to find all types of tooth positions, but you're most likely from the get-go to find laterals. And in my experience, because they're so well represented, they had to have been the main type of teeth in all types of sharks. So the question arises, how do you accurately estimate shark sizes given that every type of teeth is a different size and shape? Because the anteriors are always large and usually straight. That's the reason why they prefer calculating ancient shark species based on this tooth. The paper only said it's because it's the most distinctive tooth. That because it's not curved, it's easy to measure the length, and because it's large, there's more size variability most likely between young individuals and adults, whereas the adults have very large ones, whereas juveniles have comparatively very small anterior teeth. And I'm about to give you the formula that's provided to calculate the estimated shark total length based on the length of the anterior tooth. But first, after these messages, right? No, I just wanted to say thanks for listening this far. I have a gut feeling that because I'm sharing a lot of general information, and maybe most general listeners are not listening for this long, that I'm having fellow enthusiasts of sharks and fossils listening, and they probably already know a bunch of this general information. So I don't know if I'm wasting both your and I's time. So if you're learning something and it's absolutely revolutionary and you're like, wow, I didn't know this, but it seems like common sense, like, thank you, let me know so I can continue to provide content like this, because I'm just a messenger. This podcast is not about me. It's about nature, sharks, fossils, etc. And just in general, if you guys want to criticize my podcast, think it's terrible, let me know. I'm here to provide a service, not to be on my high horse. I don't know, maybe because I'm starting and stopping a bunch on these podcasts, I don't just record from the get-go, start to finish. As much as I wish I could do that in an ideal world, maybe it would take multiple listens to really digest all this information. You know, I don't believe in having mostly filler and just a few tad bits of good information. As ironic as it is as I'm stating this, feels like filler. Okay, so back on topic. I'll most likely post this formula as I post this podcast on my YouTube, which again is dman9fp, in case you're just listening on Podbean or some other platform that I may eventually upload this to. So if you don't have access to my YouTube channel, you might want to get out a pen and paper. Assuming you're able to, please don't write and drive. So the total length, this is in centimeters. So you'll have to convert this, if you're also American, to inches or feet to get the full picture. So total length in centimeters equals, now this might sound a little weird, negative 26.665 plus, and you have to do this calculation before the addition, the crown height in millimeters times 12.499. And the crown height has to be in millimeters. And I'll tell you how you get the crown height. Basically, you measure the length from the tip of the tooth down to where the enameloid starts. It looks like enamel, but it's actually, because they're cartilaginous fish, if I remember correctly, it's a different compound. Just as sharks don't have bones, but their skeleton, at least their vertebrae, are made out of calcified cartilage. And enamel on their teeth, which is called enameloid, may be a different substance, which again in this shark course I'll probably learn about. But basically you measure from the start of the enameloid all the way to the tip. And because it's an anterior tooth, it should be fairly simple, because they're usually straight teeth. And if you don't know what type of teeth the anterior tooth is, I would look in a very good ID book. Yeah, so just doing some general research here, it appears our teeth are made of mostly calcium phosphate, whereas shark enameloid is mostly made, if not entirely, made out of calcium fluorophosphate, which I think I heard is one of the strongest materials in the world. And I'll believe that, not to be biased for sharks, but for how common shark teeth are, and they're usually pretty intact. Even the small ones, which you'd expect to be crushed up, but those small teeth are super common in any geological formation that has shark teeth, because there's more of them. Of course, there's more juveniles than adults. That's just a part of life because they don't need as much resources and space. And because they don't really break down, because they're a super tough substance, you tend to have a more complete picture than, say, other vertebrates that fossilize. And one more side note, in case you haven't seen a Striatolamia macrota tooth, they're slender, but they're definitely a little bit more broad and robust than, say, the modern sand tiger, Carcharias taurus, which has more slender, I wouldn't say fragile, but definitely less robust teeth. That I can see why paleontologists at one point, at least some of them, believed that Striatolamia was actually a goblin shark, but it appears from studying them more, they are more closely related to sand tigers, if not being their own group that is maybe more related to sand tigers than goblin sharks. And I just realized that actually sand tigers go by different common names in different parts of the world. Of course, here in Florida, we call them sand tiger sharks. They're pretty common in aquariums because they're pretty wicked looking. They're low maintenance. They have those teeth sticking out of their jaws. They're really aggressive looking, even though they're mostly docile and they'll just eat fish. I don't think there's any attacks on humans, because if you look at their teeth, they're designed for clutching fish. So they're opportunistic for fish. They're definitely a menace for those, but for large mammals, not so much. You know, teeth can tell you so much. Not everything, but a lot more than you might think at first. So the body lengths of Striatolamia ranged at Banks Island from 40.83 to around 230 centimeters, which is 1 1/3 to about 7.5 feet. And at the Mississippi site, the maximum's around the same, but there's a lower minimum, which was 1/3 of a foot or 11 centimeters, which I'm not sure why that's the case. I would think you'd always have juveniles. Maybe there's a sampling bias, but on average, there was more larger teeth in the Banks Island. And I wish instead of giving me the average for the tooth sizes, they would actually give me the average body length, because we all know how to do those calculations. Although it was fun doing the calculations and figuring and seeing how such a small difference in a few millimeters can make a big difference in the total length, which maybe this formula isn't perfect. I've read abstracts of other papers that get at it's the best thing we have right now. And keep in mind, this formula, as far as I know, can only be used for mackerel sharks, those lamniform ancient sharks. Of course, still around today, but there's only 15 species left. And I'm sure not all of them have these big teeth. Actually, Shimada devised this formula based off of the goblin shark, so I'm not even sure how applicable it is to even all lamniforms, and I tried finding it. If you guys know, definitely let me know. There's probably controversy for having a linear formula to predict all shark sizes, and I'll tell you why. I have found in other resources using the Shimada formula for large Megalodon teeth, they calculate that the max size for Megalodon was around 60 to 65 feet. And I've seen more modern estimates that the maximum was perhaps around 50 to 55 feet. Of course, paleontologists tend to go toward conservative estimates. And of course, it's the media that likes to overemphasize the maximum size estimates because it's more exciting, right? Even though 50 feet, that is an absolutely massive organism. I don't care what it is. But in general, the minimum is seen as more believable and given more scientific leverage more times than not. Shimada's formula overestimates for large teeth because it's a linear function, whereas, and I'll get into this in the next source, as organisms become larger and larger, they start to face certain limitations with physics that it becomes harder and harder for their bodies to function, and especially as volume increases exponentially with just a little bit of extra feet, which is why it's so hard for any animal to become absolutely huge, let alone, like Godzilla proportions or what's it called? Or like the mosasaur in Jurassic World. That would never happen. But overall, with those North Canada Bank Island Striatolamia teeth, the mean average, and they were sampling hundreds of shark teeth, so this is a pretty good average. It was 13.7 millimeters, which equates to a 145 centimeter shark, roughly, which equals about 4.7 feet. And at the Mississippi Red Hot truck stop site, the average was 11.6 millimeters, which was just about 2 millimeters smaller. That came out to a 118, little over 118 centimeter shark on average, which equated to a 3.88 foot shark. The average shark at the Mississippi site was just under 1 foot shorter for a tooth that is 2 millimeters shorter. So that really raises the question, if 1 millimeter can equate to about half a foot, how accurate are the measurements? It really puts emphasis on that. But regardless, the author made it clear in the Banks Island, northern Canada, of course the colder, lower salinity environment, there was more teeth greater than 16 millimeters, which equated to sharks greater than 5.68 feet or 173 centimeters. And in the Mississippi site, most teeth were less than 14 centimeters, which equates to a 4.87 foot shark or 148.32 centimeters. So on average, there's more big sharks at the Canada site and more smaller sharks at the Mississippi site. And that's apparently reflected in the probability density function as well. So that raises the question, why are you finding more big sharks up north where there's lower salinity, it's colder? Well, in ecology, when I took the course in university, I learned about this, but good to have a refresher because I don't remember all of the natural rules that ecologists discovered. There's a rule called Bergman's rule, mostly has been studied in mammals and birds, where individuals are larger at colder temperatures in higher latitudes away from the equator, more south too. Although the author just stated that this was her best hypothesis, which kind of raises the question, if the Bergman's rule applies to sharks, why don't you see it in more species or any of the present species? Perhaps it's because we're currently in pretty much an ice age, although we're in an interglacial period whereby it's warmer. Of course, ever since the Pleistocene epoch 2 million years ago, we've been alternating between ice ages where sea level is much lower and interglacials where it's warmer and the sea levels are higher than when we're in an ice age. So maybe that has an effect, because most sharks, they really have to adjust to be able to survive because they're cold-blooded to live in Arctic regions like the Greenland shark that has a super slow metabolism. Although there's also the salmon shark, looks and functions much like a great white. At least it seems like it. I could be off the mark. Even great whites, I've heard fairly recently that they seasonally go up to Nova Scotia or somewhere up in Canada when it's warmer. And then when it gets colder, they migrate down south. Of course, it's pretty much common sense at this point that sharks migrate long distances, and especially if they're highly predatory, they can chase those prey and take advantage of those feeding opportunities. I mean, they're really efficient movers, swimmers. And this is just speculation. I believe maybe because, as stated, there was lower shark diversity in the Canadian region. Maybe that's why they grew larger, because salinity was lower. It's unusual for sharks to be able to thrive in low salinity environments, but somehow Striatolamia did it, and were very abundant. But you never know. There could definitely be more studies done there. And the author said, I don't mean to laugh, but it's pretty clear that, of course, she said we should do this experiment with Carcharias, which are a more modern type of sand tiger, and Physogaleus, which was also around that time period. Physogaleus being the false tiger shark. It has tiger shark-like teeth. I see other amateurs calling it a tiger shark all the time, but of course it's not quite a tiger shark. I think it was fairly recently they discovered that, maybe a decade or two ago. Although everything seems pretty established to me since I first got into it a few years ago. But things change all the time. I kind of worry, these podcasts might become outdated someday, but maybe the logic will shine through. I'm not sure. You just can't live your life worrying about things you can't control. That's a whole nother topic. Okay. Yeah, so maybe they're bigger up north. The environment are colder. Maybe it's because there's less sharks. I don't know. But Bergman's rule has been observed in bivalves and apparently in ant species. Yeah, that's just through general research. It's a real interesting phenomena. And I think it'd also be interesting. There's no way to test this in the fossil record, of course, because only hard parts fossilize for the most part. I mean, there's some rare exceptions. Whole sharks have been fossilized. I'll definitely make episodes on that sooner or later. You can almost guarantee that because of how rare and special that is. But how there's another ecological rule called Allen's rule, where in those northern, more extreme climates, animals have shorter limbs. Oh, I forgot to explain why Bergman's rule, the explanation behind it, because it's colder. The larger they are, the larger the volume they have, whereby the more heat they can generate, especially if they're warm-blooded, which I believe that's why lamniforms typically are much more common in those northern latitudes, because they have a limited ability to generate their own body heat, whereas most ground sharks, carchariforms, can't. They have to rely on their external environment. Not to say that makes them any better or worse. So it has to do with heat loss, where if they're larger, they lose less heat, so they can afford to become larger, or they have to become larger to keep enough heat to really function. Because this goes to basic biology, because a lot of chemical reactions in the body have to occur for life to thrive. Real basic stuff, reproduction, eating, moving. There's a whole lot of chemical reactions that are going on inside an animal's body, and the less chemical reactions that are going on, the less they're going to live and thrive. But the more southern you go, they don't have to waste all these resources becoming large, so they can afford to become smaller and become more numerous and focus their resources more reproduction versus attaining a large body size. Yeah, so the bigger an animal gets, the more volume it has and the less surface area, so less heat escapes. And Allen's rule goes by the same effect. It has to do with heat loss and retention, whereby cold climate animals have shorter limbs and body appendages when they're in colder weather to avoid heat loss. Because through natural selection, we would predict that in those colder regions, they would have shorter limbs, or in the case of sharks, fins. Although fins are mostly just rayed appendages. They're not like an arm or a leg. So maybe it wouldn't be observed in them, but they still have blood vessels and all that. So I'm not sure if it would apply or not. It would be interesting to see if it did apply to sharks from the north to south. But of course require beyond exceptional fossil preservation, where there'd be rapid burial, because cartilage breaks down super easily and quickly, unlike their teeth and sometimes their vertebrae. Of course, their vertebrae are not bone, that's made of calcified cartilage. Sharks have skeletons, they're just not like you or I skeleton. It's made out of cartilage. Basically hardened. You feel your nose and your ear, that's what cartilage is. So imagine cartilage, but with more calcium. That's what calcified cartilage is. So that's it for the main content of this podcast. I'd like to thank you for your time and for listening. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, definitely let me know on YouTube. You can reach out to me publicly, private. I think you can direct message people on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter at Elasmobranch. Yeah, I'm very surprised early 2019 that was even still available. I would have made it Elasmobranch Evolution, but apparently there's a 15 character max, and Elasmo Evolution just met that. So about suggested content, I'm open to ideas. Of course, sooner or later I'm going to cover the popular topics most likely. You know, Megalodon evolution, Helicoprion, even though that's more of a ratfish than a shark, is still an interesting chondrichthyon. Yeah. So if you guys have anything I really want to make, because these podcasts they take a lot out of you sometimes. It's trying to make high quality content on your own. It's fun. It's really fulfilling as well, regardless of the audience that may or may not get all of it and or listen to all of it. But let me know. I might set up a Patreon to help if you really want to help out. You know, if you really want some content made, I can help you. You just have to help me a little bit. I think that's a fair trade. But if not, no hard feelings. I'll make these podcasts. Spoiler alert, I don't plan on making another podcast for at least a month or two. Don't be misguided. I will definitely resume the podcast. I enjoy podcasting a lot. It's just I'm taking, as I said toward the beginning, a basic shark course. EDX was the website, where I'm still learning a lot of basic shark information. I already know a lot about sharks, a lot of basic information, but like you saw in the podcast, I wasn't 100% sure about what an amyloid was made of. Not to say I have to know 100% of everything there is to know about sharks. That's impossible. But they're my favorite group and include my favorite species, so I should be able to brush up. A lot of this stuff I already know, but some of the stuff I don't know, and I wouldn't just look up on my own, you know. A lot of species, there's a lot of shark species, especially modern species, I wouldn't just look up information for, but it's good to expand your knowledge base, which is why I try to listen to a variety of podcasts. It's fun too. Podbean is a pretty good website. I don't know if you're just listening to me on YouTube or another platform, but Podbean is a pretty good app, and I can also think I can find more stats about my listeners. Not that that's absolutely crucial, but yeah, definitely if you really like it, comment, subscribe to me on YouTube, dman9fp, follow me on Twitter at Elasmobranch. I made 3 bonus videos with extra commentary during the recording of this episode, which of course I didn't just bang it out all at once, as much as I wish I could do that. It's much easier if you have a guest or co-host. You know, you have less freedom, but you also have more responsibility. There's pros and cons to everything in life, pretty much. It's a good tip in life, but also true with podcasts. I enjoy solo podcasting. Not to say I'll never have guests or a co-host maybe someday, but I'm not anticipating it. I intend to do interviews to reach out to people, that's for sure, to learn more insights, get more personalities. Because I don't want this is not the P-squared biology podcast. This is about shark evolution, and I'm just one enthusiast. There are many, I have no doubt about that. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. I'll still respond to questions, even though I'm giving it podcasting at least a little break. It's exhausting, but still fulfilling. I might do a Q&A, but, you know, I'm trying to build up this podcast, taking it places. It has much more potential. I'm very surprised there was no Elasmobranch evolution podcast in late 2018. That there was not even a fossil fish podcast, as far as I know. There's general paleontology podcasts, of course. But yeah, that's about it. If there's anything that I said I would cover that I didn't, just ask. And I'll see you guys on the flip side next time. Alright, thanks.